again and again, as I let out a muttered string of obscenities. Finally, I sat down on the steps, breathing heavily, the tears now cold on my cheeks. "Isaac," Luke said from the doorway. "Isaac, I think we need to get out of here." I wiped the tears from my face and stood up to look at him. He pointed into the sky without looking up, and it was then I heard the faint rumble of a helicopter in the distance. I looked up. The smoke from our chimney was rising, stark white against the slate-gray sky. "Quick, let's grab what we can and go," I said, springing into action. "We'll have to go on foot and try to stay in the trees." Luckily, much of the land on either side of the road we'd followed to this point had been lightly forested. "What about Sarah?" he asked, as I rushed to the bikes and started pulling out anything useful and light enough to carry on foot. "We'll have to leave her here," I said, although the very thought of it pained me. "We can't take her with us, and we don't have any time to bury her." "No, we can't leave her like that," he said defiantly. I paused and looked at him. "How about we set the house alight and cremate her so she isn't eaten by animals or left rotting like the people upstairs?" he suggested. "It might also distract the helicopter." Yes, all right, do it quick while I get the others out." Ben stood helplessly over Brooke as she held Sarah close, crying silently. "We have to go quickly," I shouted. "The Chinese will be here soon." Ben attempted to pull Brooke's hand, but she resisted and went back to stroking Sarah's hair. I ran to Ben and handed him the pack I'd hurriedly loaded. "Go!" I knelt beside Brooke and grasped her chin, gently tilting her face to meet my gaze. "Brooke, Sarah's gone," I said, looking in her eyes. "If we don't go now, right now, we'll be killed too." The message seemed to get through, and still weeping, she slowly slid her legs out from under Sarah and eased her head onto the blanket. "Hurry, they're getting closer." Ben, Brooke, and I ran around like maniacs, gathering what belongings we could as quickly as possible, as Luke began splashing kerosene over the sitting room floor and furniture. "Enough! Go!" I yelled, stopping the twins after a minute. The choppers were too close. Luke bent over Sarah and placed a sheet over her before kissing her shrouded forehead. That small, heartfelt gesture was what amounted to her funeral, and as the noise of the chopper blades got louder, he poured kerosene over her before placing the tin to the side and striking a match. Whoomp! The fuel ignited, and we ran out into the cold. We hid in the cover of the trees a quarter-mile away and watched the oily smoke rise into the sky as two helicopters circled like vultures over a carcass. Brooke's racking sobs were the only sound that interrupted the heavy chop, chop, chop of the rotor blades. 16. The bare, dead branches of the deciduous trees, the most common in that area, didn't provide much cover, but luckily we had found a copse of spruce trees to crouch under as we watched. Thankfully, the helicopters didn't land, and after 10 or so minutes, they finished circling and departed. "Great idea to set the house alight, Luke," said Ben. "I think it maybe worked as a decoy. I'm pretty sure if we'd only left the chimney burning, they would have landed and searched the area. We'd have been toast." "Yeah, good thinking on your feet, Luke," I said, and patted his shoulder awkwardly. "Well, it wasn't really about creating a decoy. I just didn't want to leave Sarah like that," he said. Ben and I nodded somberly, but Brooke, still upset at the loss of the little girl, went to Luke and kissed him on the cheek. I heard her whisper, "Thank you." Luke's eyes widened, and I'm sure I saw a tinge of pink in his cheeks that hadn't been there a few minutes ago. "Shame about the supplies," he said awkwardly, bending over and picking up a backpack to distract us, or himself, from the moment. We'd been forced to leave most of the supplies that we'd brought from Walmart. Basically, all we had now was what we were wearing and what we had in our backpacks. I had gathered what I could from the baskets that the dogs had scattered, but it amounted to no more than some canned food and 2 sleeping bags. "We should keep moving," I said, when the sound of the choppers had faded completely. "Should we go back and gather up more supplies?" Ben asked. "I don't think so," I replied. They've scanned the area from the air, but we have to assume they might send a patrol to search the area. I'll bet they do, Luke said. And they'll probably be here sooner rather than later. Onward it is, then, Brooke said, looking sadly back in the direction of the house. We should stay off the road for a while, I said. Luke, do you think you can guide us with the atlas and the compass you grabbed from Walmart? Does a bear shit in the woods? His smile faded as his attempt to be light-hearted tanked. The death of Sarah was still too raw for all of us. Let's go. Maybe we can find some place closer to Worcester to hole up, I said quickly to cover the awkward silence. After consulting his compass, Luke pointed us in a direction, and we started our hike. The terrain rose slightly in that direction, and the forest got thicker as we went on, despite the bare trees providing less cover than we would have liked. The going was slow, and not just because of the terrain. Both Ben and I were somewhat hobbled by our recent injuries, he the dog bite to the buttock, and me the pulled muscle in my groin from my dismount in the slushy snow. It had been okay while I was warm, but this morning it was quite tender, and the snow on the ground certainly didn't help, nor the unevenness of the forest floor. As a result, we traveled much slower through the woods than we would have along the road. We'd been walking about 20 minutes when Luke stopped and looked worriedly behind us. What is it? I asked. The snow, he said. If somebody finds our trail in it leading away from the house, they can follow it right to us. Crap. I got a sinking feeling in my belly. Well, let's push on. Maybe we'll find a way ahead that'll confuse the trail. Besides, we don't know that they actually will send a ground team. We just couldn't take the risk by hanging around. There should be a road on the top of this ridge. It runs the same direction as the one we were on, Luke said. Maybe we can walk on it for a while before heading off into the woods again. At least it might slow them down if they're searching for our trail. We walked on in silence for a good 20 more minutes before we came to the edge of the trees. We found ourselves looking into the backyard of a large house with a small barn-like building off to one side. We scoped it for a few minutes, but detected no signs of movement. Should we risk a quick pop inside to check for supplies, do you think? Ben asked. If they do find our trail, I think it's too soon to stop, even for a short time, Luke said. Luke's right. We keep moving for now, I said, massaging my inner thigh as I crouched in the snow. There'll be other houses to search once we're further away. It started snowing again as we crossed the home's backyard, aiming for a gap between it and the barn. The snow was heavier than it had been before, and if we still had them, riding the bicycles would have been a nightmare or impossible. On foot, though, it wouldn't slow us down much more than what was already on the ground. This time, I was glad to see the snow falling. It was a light fall, but if it fell long enough, it would cover our tracks. At the corner of the house, we found a large paved driveway that stretched off between the trees. A snow-covered SUV sat on the icy tarmac with its driver's side door open. I approached it warily. It was abandoned, and the snow had begun to collect on the driver's seat. Follow the driveway, Luke said. It'll be harder for somebody to follow our trail there because it's more slush and ice than snow. The driveway was a couple 100 feet long, and we followed it until we came out on another road at the rear of the property. Standing in the shadow of a large evergreen tree, we looked left and right. In both directions, driveways led back to houses on either side of the street, most of them closer to the road than the one we had negotiated. I say we hang a left, Luke said. It'll confuse followers because it sort of cuts back against the direction we've been going. And if I remember the map right, not too much further on there's a road we can take to put us back on course for Worcester. I've got a bad feeling about this road, I said. I'm not sure what it was. The quiet seclusion of it, maybe? It was probably just spooked. But either way, it just felt wrong. Whether I was right or not, I had no intention of testing the theory. I think we should head straight across, through the backyard of the house, across the way, and back into the trees. It looks like there might be more evergreens over that way, so maybe that will make us harder to track if there's more snow in the branches and less on the ground. I agree with Isaac, Brooke said. I don't like the idea of cutting back. I know it sounds clever, but it might just be too clever, if you take my meaning. In any case, let's do something, Ben said. It's colder just standing around than it is walking. I guess I'm overruled, Luke said with a smile. Across and back into the woods it is. We jogged across the road as best we could, and then up a driveway on the far side. The snow was really starting to come down in thick, wet flakes, and we hurried past the house and through the backyard, veering slightly to put the house between us and the road. We came to a halt in front of a 6-foot-high chain-link fence that separated the backyard from the woods beyond. Up and over? Luke asked. I'm not sure I can make it, I said with a wince as I thought of my aching inner thigh. Don't be a wuss, man, he said. We'll help you. Scrambling over the fence turned out to be far easier than I had feared it would be, no doubt because I had 2 other guys to help lift me, and we were soon back under the trees. There were more evergreens in this section of the forest, which meant the ground was clearer and that less snow was falling on us from above. Luke used his compass to keep our course running northeast, the direction he figured that we needed to go. The going was still slow, but we were making steady progress, and I was even beginning to lose my fear that we might be tracked. 20 minutes later, we reached a road running roughly east to west and stopped so Luke could check his atlas. I checked my watch. It was 1:15, which meant that sunset would be in just over 3 hours. I know you want to avoid the roads, Luke said, but we'd really make better time by following them. Yeah, I know, I replied. We can follow this road for a while if you want, but we have to keep a good lookout. Last thing we want is a patrol catching us unaware. Thank the Almighty, Ben muttered. In reality, I was nearly as relieved as him. The uneven ground of the forest floor, not to mention scrambling to step over fallen logs and forcing my way through bushes and brambles, had really upped the pain level in the muscle I had pulled. I think this road is this one here, Luke said, pointing at his map. It goes from Northbridge back to the Worcester-Providence Turnpike. If we follow it to the left a bit, we should come to a road that branches off northeast. Following that is a straight shot. Well, straight-ish, at least, up to Medbury, which is just outside of Worcester, here. His finger traced a line on the map. How far are we from Medbury? I asked. About 2 miles as the crow flies, but probably closer to 4 following the roads with their twists and turns. About 2 hours of hard walking, then, said Brooke, tossing a glance at both her brother and I, assuming that you two don't collapse on us. I think I got another couple of hours in me, Ben said. Me too, I said, with much more conviction than I felt. The snow was still falling, but at least there wasn't much wind as we began our trek to Medbury. Following the roads, we saw no signs of others, no adult survivors, no kids trying to survive on their own, no Chinese patrols looking for anybody, nothing. The world seemed so empty and peaceful. No planes in the sky, no cars on the roads, no sounds of construction or television. I could almost imagine what it must have been like for the Pilgrims when they first landed on this vast new continent. Mr. Dresden in American history had told us that just a short while before the Europeans arrived, there had been a large and thriving native culture, not only on the east coast of North America, but stretching nearly to the Rocky Mountains. The only reason that the continent had seemed so empty to the Europeans and that they'd encountered so few Native Americans was because a plague had swept through, killing off the majority. While nature had conspired to give the Europeans a continent ripe for conquering and colonization, it seemed that the Chinese had taken matters into their own hands. "Where do you suppose all of the kids are?" asked Luke quietly. "I mean, we've seen hardly any. There's no way the Chinese could have rounded up more than a fraction." I shrugged. I had been wondering that myself, but hadn't liked the answers that had sprung to mind. Well, it's winter. There's no power or water, no adult supervision, no fresh food. I lowered my voice so Brooke wouldn't hear. I think a lot would be dead already. In this region, at least. It might be different in some of the warmer states, but then there are probably more Chinese there for that reason. They had to know that the cold would kill a lot of us. "Maybe the dead are the lucky ones," Luke muttered. kicking at the snow. "17. The snow, coupled with Ben's injury and my own, meant that we still hadn't made it to Medbury when the sun started to descend beneath the horizon. "We're about to pass by a town called Wilkersonville," Luke informed us as we walked past a cemetery with the name St. John's above the gate. "We're still at least a mile from Medbury, though." "We should find some place for the night," I said. "There's no way we'll be able to make it to Medbury before it gets dark." "Yes, I agree," Ben said. His limp had grown more pronounced in the last half hour or so. 5 minutes after we passed the cemetery, we approached a house sitting well back from the road on a half-acre of land. It was big and well kept, and, I have to say, looked inviting in the bright twilight. "That looks as good a place as any, don't you think?" asked Ben. We all agreed it would be a good place to bed down for the night, so we turned to trudge up the long driveway. We were about 30 feet from the front porch when the door opened, revealing a warm yellow light within. Shocked, we all froze in place. My hand crept toward my pocket, and I only relaxed slightly when I saw it was a blond-haired boy about our age, or possibly a year or two younger. He looked around quickly and urgently gestured for us to come inside. Whether it was the cold or the pain or the fatigue, I'm not sure, but we rushed as one toward the door without thinking about it. The boy stepped aside quickly, allowing us to pile in, and slammed the door behind us, shooting 3 large bolts home to secure the heavy door. We came to a standstill, panting and catching our breath as we found ourselves face to face with 3 more teenagers, these ones armed. I felt my heart sink as Luke and the others put their hands up. I nearly pulled my .38 but thought better of it when I saw one of them was pointing a crossbow at Brooks' chest. The other 2 had a baseball bat and a machete, respectively. I took my hand out of my pocket and raised my hands, praying that none of the others would do anything rash. "Hey, sorry to rush you in like that, but we couldn't take the chance of you drawing attention to us," said the boy who had beckoned us into the house, or trap. The blond boy came around and gestured to his mates, who lowered their weapons. He looked surer of himself now, and I reevaluated my first impression of him. Close up, I could see that he was probably my age. Not only that, he appeared self-confident, and he was clearly the leader of their group. "I'm Will. This is Bo, Ryan, and Rodney. Who's in charge of your little group?" Luke gestured toward me. "Isaac is. I'm Luke, and this is Ben and Brooke." The twins nodded, still looking wary. Will smiled at them almost dismissively, his stare honing in on me. He appeared to be sizing me up. I stared back, not dropping my own gaze. I don't know quite what it was about him, the blond good looks or his crooked smile, but I felt an instant mistrust. Finally, he nodded and held out his hand, and after a moment I shook it. "Hey." Formalities over, he pointed to a corner of the room. "Please, make yourselves at home. You can put your stuff in that corner if you want, and you must be hungry. We were just about to eat." "I could eat a horse and chase the jockey," said Luke, drawing a laugh from everyone except me. Ben and Brooke also seemed to relax and joined Luke offloading their gear in the corner, Ben's backpack with the handle of the shotgun protruding in plain sight. If William and his friends noticed, they didn't let on. Luke took his crossbow from his shoulder and placed it with his pack. Not quite convinced we were in no danger, I kept my jacket on and placed my backpack in the corner on top of Luke's weapon. Now I had time to look around. We stood in a richly furnished parlor. The yellow light was coming from gas lanterns located at various points around the room, and the toasty warmth immediately evident when we had come in was coming from a gas radiator. The windows were blacked out by black plastic that hung behind the white lace curtains, effectively hiding the light and the lanterns to the outside. Ben and Brooke followed Will out of the room, and Luke looked at me. I half expected him to tell me he was also wary of the occupants of the house, but instead he clapped me on the shoulder. "Cheer up, Isaac. It smells like hot food." He was smiling ear to ear as he propelled me toward the door of what I could see was a dining room. I didn't like the way the other 3 boys hung back and waited for us to go through. I especially didn't like that they hadn't put their weapons down. I looked back at them and saw the stockiest of the boys, the one carrying the crossbow, Bo, I think, stay behind and settle into a chair by the window. He pulled the dark plastic that was over the window to the side and peered out into the rapidly darkening afternoon. "Bo's our lookout for tonight," said William, from directly behind me. The large dining room opened into a kitchen that was also well lit and invitingly warm. My mouth dropped open. All the available floor and bench space in the kitchen was taken up by canned and packaged food, and against one wall stood a stack of gallon containers of fresh water. On the gas stove, a large, probably industrial, kitchen-sized stock pot steamed happily. I knew instantly it was the source of the wonderful meaty smell that made my stomach rumble despite my uneasiness. Will informed us it was beef stew and invited us to sit at the huge table that dominated the space. "Ryan, set our guests a place, please. Rodney, you can start to serve." Rodney and Ryan put their weapons on the kitchen counter and got busy. Within a few minutes we were at the table as Rodney, a big, sullen boy, went from place to place ladling stew into our bowls. I took in the empty chair next to Brooke, and an image of Sarah flashed across my mind. It was hard to believe that just 24 hours before we had been laughing and enjoying our game of Monopoly with her. She should have been here too. Rodney was just serving Ben, the last of us to have his bowl filled with the delicious-smelling stew, when Will clapped his hands suddenly. Entranced by the aroma and ready to dig in as we were, we all jumped. I almost forgot. We watched him scoot around the counter to the oven. A second later, he returned carrying a wooden board with 2 huge loaves of freshly baked bread. Luke and the twins greeted this unexpected sight with shouts of pleasure. I was silent, but my mouth watered in anticipation. After surviving so long on canned, mostly cold food, the feast laid before us seemed to be heaven sent. As excited at the prospect of a warm meal as I was, the oddness of these boys picked at the edges of my consciousness. Will seemed content, almost happy for us to make pigs of ourselves. There was plenty to go around, and they clearly weren't wanting. We broke the bread off in chunks and dipped it into the generous bowls of the tasty stew. I relaxed slowly as we ate. The hearty food and the buoyant mood of my group gradually chipped away at my disquiet. Will was quite the host, and I didn't fail to notice that Brooke appeared to be quite smitten with him, laughing enthusiastically at his jokes and stories. This didn't seem to bother Luke or Ben, who were as engaged as she by our charismatic host. It turned out that Will's group had made several raids into Medbury, one time managing to start an old truck and load it with all the supplies they could fit. I told them the story of the pickup and the dreadful aerial response from the Chinese. Will shrugged. "Luckily, it was only a short journey for us." My disquiet again reared its ugly head, not only because of the lack of detail he provided to explain their good fortune, but also at the lack of conversation from the other boys. It was almost as if they had been ordered not to speak. After dinner, Will showed us where we could clean up, a small bathroom down the hall from the kitchen, and then invited us back into the parlor. We fell to the carpet around the radiator, our full bellies bulging. Bo still sat at the window, barely acknowledging the rest of us as we came in. He clearly took his job as a sentry very seriously. "Have you had much trouble?" I asked, addressing him. He just looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign tongue. I saw Rodney, who was standing in the doorway to the dining room, give Will a strange look that none of the others saw. "Honestly, we've been really lucky," Will answered for him. "Like you, we've had some looters come through, but each time we've been able to scare them off. There was also a group of about 12 kids. We put them up for a couple of nights before they moved on." This last comment piqued my interest. "Where did they move on to?" They were heading to the city," he said. "Worcester?" Luke asked. "Yes," he said quickly. "What about you all? What are your plans?" Before I could say anything, Brooke had blurted about New Hampshire and the Morse code signal. I felt a flash of anger but held my tongue. William was silent for a moment, digesting this information. I think he was about to ask more questions when she followed up with an enthusiastic, "You should come with us." Thanks for the offer, but we're happy here. Well, for the winter at least. You're welcome to stay tonight, though, for as long as you want, he replied graciously. I breathed an inward sigh of relief, both at his refusal and the offer of a night's accommodation. Oh, marvelous. Thank you, Will. You're very kind, said Brooke. She turned to me. Can we stay, Isaac? Yes, it sounds like a great idea to get our strength back. I vote for staying a few days, said Ben. Me too, boss, said Luke. Thanks for the offer, I said, outnumbered but resolute. We'll take you up on tonight, but only one night. We'll leave in the morning. It makes sense to stay at least another night, Isaac, Will said, almost too quickly. To gather your strength, and to be honest, he smiled at Brooke, we could really do with the company. Ben and Brooke enthusiastically backed him up, but Luke for the first time wasn't quite as keen. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with that look he'd seen Will give Brooke. Put on the spot, I couldn't come up with a reason to say no outright, so I did the next best thing. All right, we'll stay tonight and make our decision about tomorrow night after breakfast. Sounds good, said Luke, offering me a knuckle bump. Ben and Brooke weren't quite satisfied with that decision, but didn't argue. Yet. We didn't chat much longer. Our group was bushed after our flight from the last refuge. Will ordered Rodney to bring mattresses and pillows to the parlor. It seemed odd, this smaller boy ordering the bigger one about like that, but Rodney took it with no complaint. Will bid us good night and went to his own bedroom, which was apparently one of the perks of being in charge. 10 minutes later, the twins were asleep on a double mattress, and Luke had taken a comfortable-looking sofa and was snoring softly. I was on a single mattress, watching the comings and goings of Will's group and attempting to ward off sleep. Ryan had relieved Bo at the window, and Bo was also now quietly snoring in an armchair. Rodney had disappeared with Will. A tide of weariness lapped at the beach of my consciousness, and I closed my eyes, telling myself it would just be for a second. My sleep was fitful at first, and I remembered jumping a few times. One of those times I saw Ryan at the window, cradling the crossbow as he regarded me with his expressionless, pale face. He looked away immediately, and I slowly relaxed. Soon I fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I awoke late the next morning, alone in the room except for Rodney, who at some point had relieved Ryan at the window. I chastised myself. I had slept in after everyone again, not even stirring when they had gotten up. I had read about soldiers being able to sleep at any time and waking up at the slightest noise. I wondered how long I had to live in this new world of almost constant danger before I would be able to do that. Where are the others? I asked Rodney. Out back, he said, without looking at me. I stood up and picked up the jacket I had curled into a ball and used as a pillow. I felt the comforting shape of the .38 and then put the jacket on carefully so as not to drop it. There were plates on the table in the kitchen with the remains of a pancake breakfast on them. That's not what caught my attention, though. It was the laughing and squeals of delight from outside. I went to the sliding door. Its glass had been taped and blacked out, too. I peeked through a crack and was surprised to see Ben, Brooke, Luke, and the rest of our hosts running around like lunatics throwing snowballs at each other. They were in a private courtyard bordered by a tall hedge. As I watched, Luke failed to duck a fastball from Will and fell on his butt, his face covered in ice. I couldn't help but smile and slid open the door. "Hello, sleepyhead," yelled Brooke, running up to me and giving me a hug as I stepped out. Her cheeks were pink and her eyes watery, and she looked just about the happiest I had ever seen her. Whether my presence was a dampener or the game had come to a natural conclusion, I don't know. But we headed back inside almost immediately, and Will made us mugs of hot chocolate using powdered milk and cocoa. I accepted the last 2 pancakes, and even though they were cold, they were delicious. Will fell into a conversation with the others about the before times, and I excused myself. I needed to whiz badly and walked down the hall to the bathroom Will had pointed out the night before. I had my hand on the door handle when I decided to have a quick peek in one of the other rooms. This was the first time I'd been alone without one of their group within sight. The door swung open on silent hinges, and I found myself looking into what used to be a child's bedroom. I whistled softly. The room's pink walls were stacked high with cardboard boxes of food. Powdered milk, flour, dehydrated eggs, canned vegetables, and more water. Suddenly, Will's explanation of raids on the local supermarket seemed weak at best. This stuff looked like it had been taken from a warehouse. Fair enough if they'd found a gold mine and didn't want to share, but I didn't like being lied to. I closed the door. As I relieved myself, I was even more convinced that we should leave first thing in the morning tomorrow. I knew there was zero chance of persuading the others to go today. I had left my run too late. The rest of the day passed uneventfully with board games and some cards, and after another hearty meal, we discussed our plans for the morning. Rodney, who would be on watch that night, was to awaken us just before daybreak so we could resume our journey. Brooke and Ben tried to persuade me that we should stay longer, but with Luke's support I won out. Will didn't try talking us into staying longer this time. We soon found out why. "18. The crash of the front door being kicked open ripped me from sleep, and I sat up fast. Red beams of light cut through the darkness of the parlor as a handful of figures rushed through the front door, shouting in Chinese. Instantly alert, I dug through my jacket for my handgun. It was gone. In the glow of the weapons, a figure loomed over me, and I looked up to see Will's smiling face. What the hell? I began to scramble to my feet and immediately found myself back on the floor with my cheek stinging. The little weasel had slapped me across the face. Confused and enraged, I tried to rise to my feet again, only to feel a cold, hard ring of metal pressed against my neck. I froze, and in the wildly changing backdrop of shadows and light, I saw the gangly silhouette of Luke tackle another stocky form, probably Rodney, and shoot back to his feet with the baseball bat in his hand. Luke's back was to me, and I saw him wind up, preparing to club the nearest interloper. He didn't finish his swing. A series of 3 loud bangs, each accompanied by a bright flash, sounded from the direction of the door. I saw Luke jerk as each of the bullets hit him. "No!" I screamed helplessly, as he fell with a heavy thud. There was a voice yelling in Chinese near the door to the dining room. "Stay the bloody hell away from my sister!" yelled Ben, before groaning in pain. I pulled myself up, ignoring the weapon pressed against my neck, and ran to the prone figure of Luke. I hadn't made it 3 feet when there was a loud pop, and something that felt like a speeding bus hit my right arm and shoulder, sending me spinning to the floor. I've been shot! The thought reverberated through my mind as I lay winded, trying to get my breath back. I reached over and ran my left hand up my right arm to the shoulder. I didn't feel any blood, but my entire upper arm and shoulder were numb. What the hell? Then the answer came to me. Rubber bullets like the ones police use in riots. Relief washed over me. Luke wasn't dead. Someone shouted in Chinese again, closer this time, and I was pulled roughly to my feet. One of the lanterns was lit, and I turned to look, my eyes swimming with tears of pain and frustration. Will approached one of the Chinese soldiers. By the light of the lantern, I saw the soldiers were all clad in black and carrying strange, large-barreled guns. The treacherous bastard handed my pistol and Luke's crossbow to one of them, then turned and approached me, smiling. "You won't be needing those anymore." Fury engulfed me, and I broke free of the soldier holding my arm and hammered Will square on the nose with a beautiful right hook. His nose crunched under my fist and gushed technicolor red as he fell backwards with a groan. I stood over him waiting, almost praying for him to get back up. A hand turned me and a Chinese rifle butt caught me dead center in the forehead. The world went dark. Part 3. Encounters. 19. I don't know how long I was out, but when I awoke, I was lying face down on a cold, unyielding surface that was bouncing and vibrating under me. I hurt. My right arm and shoulder felt like they were about to fall off, and my head was splitting agony. My arms were behind my back, and I felt a tight pressure around my wrists. After a few moments, I became aware of the noises around me, including the noise of an engine. I was in a truck or van. I began to struggle, which caused the bindings on my wrists to feel as if they were cutting into my skin. "It'll be all right," I heard a voice whisper. "Ben." "Shush, we don't want the gods back here again," I heard Brooke whisper back. Turning my head in their direction, I strained my eyes to try and see anything in the darkness. It was pitch black wherever we were. I gave up and just closed my eyes again. "What happened to Luke?" I asked, speaking as loudly as I dared, which is to say a harsh whisper. "Isaac, you're awake," said Ben, relief flooding his voice. "We've been captured by a Chinese patrol." "Thanks for the news flash, old chap," I said, then groaned as I rolled over toward their voices. "Luke's in here too, someplace, probably still unconscious from his last thrashing," he responded evenly, my sarcasm lost on him or ignored. "Be quiet, both of you," Brooke said under her breath. "Luke woke up when they were loading us into the back, and he made a ruckus. They hit him on the back of the neck and knocked him out again. We wouldn't want the same thing to happen to any of us." "Any idea where we are, or where they're taking us?" I asked, dropping my whisper lower. "No, they tied our hands behind our backs and piled us into the back of this truck," Ben explained. "I tried to catch what they were saying to those traders, but they were too far away. You really got that little prick a good one, by the way. I imagine he'll think twice before he mouths off to someone again." Well, yes, it all made sense now. The abundant food, the gas, and the insistence we stay just one more night. Their strange willingness to help us. They were working for the Chinese, trapping unsuspecting American kids and calling them in to collect. The house was a honey trap. How long was I out? We'd been driving for about 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Was that all? I felt like I had been out for a whole day at least. I tried to sit up, which was not easy with my hands tied behind my back. Finally, I shuffled to the wall of the truck and managed to maneuver myself into a sitting position. Twisting my hands and fingers around, I discovered thin plastic bindings held my wrists. They had not actually cut into me, but were tight enough that my fingers were starting to get tingly. "What are we going to do, Isaac?" Ben asked. I felt helpless and very much lacking as a leader right then, even though I hadn't asked for the gig. "I'm not sure. Let me think on it for a while." We fell into silence. To be honest, I didn't do a whole lot of thinking. The pain in my head and the other injuries I'd suffered didn't leave room for much besides self-pity. About a half hour after I awoke, a groan came from the darkness near the rear of the truck. "Luke?" "Yeah," he groaned. "I think my skull is caved in. Where are we?" "Still in the truck. Don't speak too loudly." "Yeah, not sure I could if I wanted to." "Ben and Brooke?" "We're here," the twins said in uncanny unison. Luke giggled despite his obvious pain. "Just rest for now," I said. "Not much else we can do." "Okay." We fell silent again. I still felt disoriented, but was slowly coming back to my senses. The truck drove on at an even speed, slowing occasionally to turn in tight arcs before speeding up again, weaving past abandoned vehicles, I assumed. After what I think was about another half hour, the vehicle slowed, and I found myself sliding across the metal floor and tipping onto my right side as the driver turned the corner a little too fast. I barely registered the truck stopping through the reignited pain in my bruised arm and shoulder. Doors slammed up front, and there was a short pause before the roller door clattered open to reveal the silhouettes of our captors. I blinked rapidly as my eyes adjusted to the dim light. One of the soldiers climbed in. "Pit stop," he said, in heavily accented but surprisingly good English. "You will use the bathroom now." We learned later that many Chinese patrols had soldiers attached to their units who had spent time in America as exchange students. "What if we don't have to go?" Luke groaned. "It's your last chance to go. We have a long drive ahead and no more pit stops. The only stops ahead are to collect more kids like you along the way." "I could take a leak," I said, using the wall to force myself to my feet. "Thanks." "You are all going, everybody up, and no funny stuff. We're watching.
And we put away the rubber bullets from last night. If you try to run, we'll use the real thing," the soldier said, patting the small machine gun he was holding before slinging it over his shoulder. The rubber bullets had been bad enough. I never wanted to feel the impact of a live round, that was for sure. I stepped down and out from the van with the help of the English-speaking soldier. We were at a rest stop beside a freeway, and it was still dark, but the sky was brightening with a pink pre-dawn glow. At the restroom door, the soldier stopped us. "One at a time," he said. "I am watching, and Chinese watching around the back. Like I said, no funny stuff." He pulled Brooke forward and turned her around, pulling a small pocket knife from the pocket of his uniform. He cut through the zip tie with one movement and shoved her toward the door. "Ladies first," he said. Brooke disappeared inside, but not before giving him a defiant stare over her shoulder. "You and Chan, huh? How many more of you bastards are there?" asked Luke. My eyes widened. The soldier looked at Luke, his cheekbone and chin bruised from his previous beating, and smiled dangerously. Without warning, he delivered a hard slap across his face. Luke looked at him insolently. "You have already been more trouble than you are worth, Mr. Redhead," the soldier said. "You better hope we don't find many more pickups between here and Washington. If the truck gets too full, it's possible that accidents may happen to some of you." "Washington State or the city?" I asked quickly. My reason for the question was to take his attention from Luke, who looked like he was about to do some more poking. It was risky asking questions, but no riskier than Luke getting killed for impertinence. The soldier turned his gaze on me. "We think it is important to take you to a work camp in an unfamiliar area," he said. "Less chance of trouble. But trucking you all the way across the country is cost prohibitive. New workers are relocated north and south, not east and west." "City, then," I replied, surprised that he was happy to talk. "Yes," he said. "The city." "You speak English very well," I said. "Where did you learn it?" "Stanford," he said. "I went to graduate school there. American graduate schools are a joke, or were." "You have an advanced degree?" I asked. "What are you doing on a detail like this?" "Like I said, American graduate schools were a joke. Most business and government agencies at home consider my doctorate in anthropology to be little better than the Chinese equivalent of a master's degree." The soldier stepped over to the bathroom door and rapped loudly. "You are taking a long time, honey. Hurry up." It was then, over his shoulder, that my eyes were drawn to the shadows at the corner of the bathroom block. At first, I thought I was hallucinating, but when I concentrated, there was no doubt. Someone in a ski mask, their head a darker shape in the shadows, was peering at us from the corner of the building. I didn't react. I was pretty sure the others didn't spot our visitor, and the arrogant soldier was oblivious. Then the shape was gone, vanishing so quickly I almost questioned whether I had really seen anything. "You haven't till I count to 3, the soldier yelled and banged on the door. "After that, if I must, I will come in and help you finish up." "You bloody—" Ben started, but Luke and I quickly stepped between him and the soldier. "That won't help, Ben," I said, for the benefit of our captor, then mouthed, "Just wait," before, "It'll just get you beaten up like us." Ben and Luke looked at me with eyebrows raised, but we all turned to the soldier when he began to count. 1, 2, 3. He didn't finish his count. We saw him tense and stiffen before stumbling away from the door and spinning around to look at us angrily. We stepped back as he reached over his shoulder, grasping for something. "What?" he began, but crumpled to the ground before he could finish. I rushed over to him and fell to my knees, twisting my back to him so I could get my bound hands close to the knife that hung on his belt. "Quick, help me get his knife," I said to Luke. "We can cut our wrists free and get the hell out of here." I knew the person in black had done this, but I had no way of knowing if the enemy of my enemy was my friend. If we could get free and get the truck, we might not need to find out. Isaac?" Luke replied, looking over my shoulder and not moving. "What are you waiting for, Luke? Hurry!" "Isaac, there are 2 guys dressed like ninjas, right behind you." "Yes," said Ben, stepping up beside him. and they aren't the turtle kind. I spun around and saw the black-clad person I had seen before and a taller man dressed identically. They weren't really dressed as ninjas, I realized. They were in black kung fu gear with ski masks. The taller one was holding a sort of tube thing in his hands, and I realized it was a blowgun. My friend Tommy used to have the Nerf version of one. We'd played with it the last time I had seen him. "Cut them free," the taller figure said to his partner. "I'm going to see if Allie and Arthur have secured the truck." "This guard said there was another one around the back of the building," I said. "Already taken care of, before we got your friend out through the bathroom window," our mysterious savior said as he walked away. "Is Brooke safe?" Ben asked the one who had approached us. "The girl? Yes. Well, as safe as can be expected," he said, producing a pocket knife. "Turn around and I'll free your hands." He quickly cut us free and pulled his mask off to reveal a teenage face framed by shaggy blonde hair. With the ski mask off, he looked more like a surfer than a ninja. "Thanks," I said. "I'm Isaac. This is Luke and Ben." "I'm John," he replied. "Follow me. Sonny wants us to gather at the truck." "What truck?" Luke asked. "The one you came in, of course. Come on." We followed John back to the truck, where we found two more ninjas. They were standing over two more Chinese soldiers who were laid out next to the cab. Both of their heads rested at awkward angles. "Oh dear," Ben said quietly. As we reached them, the taller one, and a girl with long dark hair holding her ski mask in her hand, led Brooke out to us. The tall one, who was obviously the leader, then pulled off his mask. He was Chinese. I guess I flinched because he looked at me and immediately burst out laughing. "Don't freak out, man," he said in a perfect American accent, and held out his hand. "I'm not one of them, but luckily I have their genes, or I'd have been dead meat when the flu hit. I'm Sonny Lee." I shook his hand and introduced our group. Within a few minutes, we had our backpacks back and, happily, also our weapons. They had been confiscated by the Chinese back at Will's and had been loaded into a cargo trunk under the side of the truck. Obviously, the Chinese didn't allow Will's group to keep more weapons than necessary. Sonny offered us refuge with his group for as long as we wanted. Unlike my first impression of Will, Sonny came across as welcoming and honest from the get-go, and besides, he had demonstrated clearly that he wasn't in cahoots with the Chinese. They were based in Worcester, too, which was our next goal, so we all agreed to take up their offer. "You guys get the truck loaded. I have something to take care of. John, you can help me." They headed back to the restrooms, and when they returned, Sonny was wearing the uniform of the man who had been escorting us. The look on his face was grim, and it didn't take much to work out what he'd done with the unconscious officer. From the rear of the truck where I was about to climb in, I saw them drag the two bodies by the truck away. When they were done, John climbed in with us and Sonny closed the roller door. The pit stop had come at the first rest area on the freeway between Worcester and Boston. Sonny's other ninjas were all teenagers: Allie, Karen, and Arthur. During the trip, Sonny's crew were very forthcoming, and we asked a lot of questions. It turned out Sonny was a Chinese American, born in China less than a week before his parents had come to live in the United States. Sonny had no memories of his homeland. He barely spoke Chinese, as his father had been adamant that he be raised as an American. The only place where this didn't apply was in martial arts. Mr. Lee had made sure his son was well trained in traditional Chinese arts, such as Tai Chi and Wing Chun Kung Fu. Sonny had apparently taken such training to heart. The others explained he'd won several martial arts tournaments as a teen and a young adult, and when the infection came, the 28-year-old Sonny had been the Sifu of one of the most popular martial arts academies in the state. Arthur, John, Allie, and Karen were what remained of his students, along with Mark and Samara, who had been left back at their base of operations. I didn't let on about my own kung fu experience just then. We had only just met them, and as good as the first impressions were, I felt it might be better to keep my cards close to my chest, especially given what had happened when we trusted Will and his group. After a quick stop at a department store outside of Worcester to load some supplies into the back of the truck, we were soon on our way to the Martial Arts Academy, where Sonny and his students had been holed up since Hell Week. 20. Sonny parked the truck in the underground garage next to the academy, and we helped unload the supplies they'd picked up. The academy took up the whole ground floor of a low-rise building. It was carpeted and tidy, with equipment and gear stowed neatly on shelving against the wall. I also saw a rack of assorted hand weapons that took my interest. When we were done, we sat around a table drinking long-life apple juice Sonny had poured us as the others packed away the new supplies. I asked him if he'd felt safe driving the truck. They marked their trucks with a special paint on the top to identify them to their satellites. So until the truck is reported as overdue, Chinese monitoring won't pick up the truck as a threat. Of course, it's lucky they don't have checkpoints set up here yet. I'm not so confident I could have bluffed my way through a face-to-face meeting, uniform or no uniform.
Will you get rid of it?
Asked Luke. Yeah, we can't keep it very long. Tonight after dark, we'll drive it to a different parking garage and burn it, Sonny said. This'll make the third truck we've hijacked from them in 2 weeks, so the heat might be on if they work out where we've ended up. Third, I said. And they haven't changed their routines or sent an armed response? Just choppers. I think the first couple of times they probably thought it's just a group of kids. Might be different this time, given that there were prisoners in it and that we killed 4 soldiers instead of the 2 we were expecting. We have a radio from the soldier in the first truck we took, so we listen in on their chatter now and then, although I'm the only one here that even partially understands it. They're probably speaking Mandarin, while it sounds like you might be Cantonese, Brooke said. That's right. How did you know? He looked impressed. They call you Sifu, Brooke said. That's a Cantonese term. In Mandarin, the term is Shifu, subtle, but still a difference. You speak Chinese? Sonny asked. Just a little, she replied, blushing. I had a year of Mandarin, and the teacher often liked to point out the difference between Mandarin and Cantonese. Do you or any of your blokes know Morse code, by any chance? Ben asked, stepping up beside his sister and placing a hand on her shoulder. I think Arthur and John have a handle on it, Sonny said. They were both Boy Scouts. Why? We spent half an hour telling Sonny what we knew of the message and what we had worked out. I think we'd all just decided it had to be done. We had to trust someone, and this seemed like the right opportunity and the right company to do it in. Do you have a normal radio with AM reception? I asked. It would be great to get the message written down so we have more to go on. Of course, although we haven't turned it on in weeks. I hadn't even thought of trying the AM channels, Sonny said, and pointed to Luke and me. We'll get it out later. Let's check your injuries first. You two especially look like you've been in the wars. Sonny, who apparently had some medical knowledge but no formal training, took some time to check over our assorted injuries and bruises. Brooke made herself scarce when Luke and I took off our shirts, while Ben looked as if he was torn between mentioning his dog bite on the backside or following his sister out the door. In the end, he chose the latter, and Luke and I had a chuckle. Anything I should be aware of? Asked Sonny. No, nothing, I said, still smiling. Sonny probed the lump on my forehead as gently as he could, but it hurt like hell. I sucked in a pained breath. Sorry. I don't think your skull is fractured, but you probably still have a mild concussion. The lump on your head and the black eyes will fade in a week or 2. My arm and shoulder had come out in a massive purple bruise where the rubber bullet had hit me, but again, he didn't think there were any fractures or permanent damage. At least the new injuries meant I barely even felt the muscle I had strained in my thigh anymore. He moved on to Luke. Luke's rib cage was badly bruised, and based on the tenderness, Sonny thought he may have some cracked ribs. Of course, without an x-ray it's impossible to tell, but I'll strap you up anyway. He didn't show any signs of concussions when Sonny looked into his eyes. Apparently the Chinese soldiers had been quite skillful in disabling us without doing too much damage. When he was done, he looked us over. You guys look beat, and after what you went through, who can blame you? Go ahead and take a load off. The practice mats make excellent beds. I'll wake you if we learn anything new. That is exactly what we did. The practice mats did make rather good mattresses to sleep on compared to the rocky ground, although they weren't really comparable to a real bed. Beggars aren't choosers, though. Ben and Brooke bunked down with us, too, and Sonny made sure the other kids gave us some time to ourselves. Luke and Ben were snoring almost as soon as they lay down, and Brooke was sleeping soundly not long after. I was tired, too, but it took a while for me to get to sleep. I was thinking about how lucky we had been. Lucky that our captors had chosen to stop where they had. Lucky that Sonny and his group had been out that particular night on one of their missions to harass the enemy. Hopefully, it meant our fortunes were turning. I also thought about Sonny. He had been born in China, but raised as an American, and he had a rage inside of him that scared me a little when I heard him talk about the Chinese that were invading his homeland. He seemed competent at leading his group of students, and if the trophies in the case by the front doors of the academy were any indication, he was probably capable of kicking a tremendous amount of butt. I worried, though. What would happen to him and his wards if the Chinese military decided to launch a strike on Worcester to stop the truck disappearances? I did not want to be here when that went down. A few isolated patrols without support were one thing, but somehow I doubted that Sonny's ninjas would be up to taking on a larger group of Chinese soldiers focused on hunting them down. I decided I would do my best to talk them into coming with us to the safe haven. They would certainly be an asset to our little group. Finally, my weariness got the better of me, and I fell asleep feeling more hopeful than I had since the dog attack. I rarely remember my dreams, but that day I clearly remember dreaming of Sarah on a road, winding its way through a forest. She was walking away from me and wouldn't look back, no matter how loud I called or how far I followed her. It was late afternoon before Sonny woke us up. He told us that both Arthur and John had listened to the coded message and confirmed it was the same message repeated over and over, switching frequencies every other time. Maybe it's automated? It might even be a trap, he worried. Maybe, but I don't think the Chinese would go to all that trouble when they just round up everyone, said Luke. They have all the time in the world, after all. Excited, we all rushed to the kitchen where Arthur and John sat by the radio. Arthur slid the writing pad to me. Safe Haven NH. Look for the dragon on the White Mount. So there's no actual location? This isn't much more than we already knew, I said, slightly disappointed. No, it figures, said Luke. They can't be too detailed. It has to be cryptic in case the Chinese come across it. I don't even know if they use Morse code, but if they do, the message is backwards and only contains clues. It's pretty clever, really. Let me get my atlas, now that we have light and my fingers aren't ice blocks. He rushed out of the room. When we go, are you going to come with us? I asked. We'd be glad to have you. Sonny didn't answer right away, perhaps conscious of the stares from Arthur and John. I don't know, he said. We have it pretty sweet here at the moment, but who knows how long that will last. True. And think, even if we don't find any other survivors there, it's going to take the Chinese longer to colonize the mountains of New Hampshire than it is the urban centers like Worcester, I said. He nodded, looking thoughtful. We'd have to think on it and run it by the others to see what they think. Luke hustled back in, slamming the atlas on the table and poring over the map of New Hampshire. I looked over his shoulder as he ran his finger over and around the part of the map showing the White Mountains National Forest. His finger halted after only 30 seconds, then he pressed it into the page hard enough for the tip to go white. There it is, my friends, he declared, looking at me triumphantly. He was pointing at a spot in the national park identified as Drake Mountain. Drake Mountain? The others joined us, jostling for a view and bumping heads. Yes, he said. Drake Mountain, what about it? Drake. Drake is another word for dragon. Dragon on the White Mount. Ah, of course, I said, the penny finally dropping. I've been there, said a voice behind us. It was Allie. She had come into the room as we crowded over the map. My parents took me to Drake Mountain Ski Resort 2 years ago. Well done, Luke, said Sonny, clapping him on the shoulder. My friend looked extremely happy with himself, and I couldn't blame him. For the moment we were all happy, the woes of the world forgotten in the glow of this little beacon of hope. After we had all calmed down a little, we talked through what we had found out. So, it's close to Lincoln, on the southern edge of the White Mountain National Forest, said Sonny. That's about 150 miles from here to there. Not a fun trip, and especially now that the weather looks like it's turning for the worse. He's right, Luke said, after a quick flip back to the Massachusetts page. That's a hell of a walk, man. I'm hoping we don't have to. To what? Walk, I said with a smile. Sonny's shown us the way. We commandeer a Chinese patrol truck and drive it there. 150 miles shouldn't take us longer than, say, 3 or 4 hours. If we have any luck at all, we can do that well before it's reported overdue. I'm not sure I'd count on our luck, dude, Luke said, shaking his head. It seems to be running both ways lately, and there's no telling when it'll be good or bad. 21. Later, when we were alone, Luke and I ran through our options. We have a while to work on a plan, I said. A few days at least, until the uproar over the missing truck dies down. Stay here in the meantime? If Sonny will let us. He seems like a straight-up guy, I said. I can deal with a few more nights of sleeping on those mats, Luke said, his face splitting into a smile. After the beatings and rubber bullets, my